All right, happy Monday. Happy Monday. Hello, everybody. Parsha class. This week's Parsha is Ve'eschanan, Ve'etchanan. Eschanan is the numerical value of 515, or what's called gematria. Gematria 515. 515. A person who wrote a whole book connecting the Parsha and words in the Parsha to numerical values, to gematrias, was someone called the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim was the Rav of Krakow, and when he arrived to be the Rav, the rabbi, the main rabbi in Krakow, basically the rabbi in Krakow passed away, I think in the 1600s or the 1700s. I have to look it up. Someone passed away and they had tryouts. You can come and get an interview to be the Rav of the town of Krakow. And who shows up? This I think he was 26, this 26-year-old rabbinical student. Not a rabbinical student, just the guy who was learning. And he was competing against these older gentlemen. As you can imagine, when you think of a Rav of a town, especially Krakow, Poland, 17th, 18th century, long white beard, gray hair or no hair. And here comes this kid. And they say, whoa, you can't come. Well, show us something. Like, they were impressed. They interviewed him and they were impressed, but they said, you're too young. We need something more to give you boost you up. So the night before he wrote, that night he wrote an entire book. That night, an entire book called the Baal HaTurim. All of the gematrias to the whole parsha. It's like thousands and thousands of parshias words in the parsha, and what are the numerical value of them, and the significance of that. And one of them, for example, is the opening of this week's parsha, Ve'eschanan, which is gematria 515. Why? What does that mean? Because Moses prayed 515 times right before the end of his life to go into the land of Israel. Remember, Moses hit the rock, and God said to him, now you can't go into the land of Israel. I told you to speak to the rock. You hit the rock. And therefore, the Jewish people were less impressed by your capabilities. And so as a punishment, because of, you're on the spiritual level that you're holding, you should have done exactly as I told you. Now, if God told me to speak to the rock and I hit the rock, I'm not really going to, and I end up hitting the rock, I don't think my punishment will be the same as Moses's. But from Moses' level, he should have known better. On a deeper level, he did it on purpose. Moses knew to speak to the rock. Moses doesn't make mistakes, especially not mistakes like that. He knew to hit the rock. And he was trying to give over a lesson in leadership at the time, and for all leaders in the future generation. Most leaders of the Jewish people are buried outside the land of Israel. Most. Because the leader of a generation is like the captain of a ship. He's the last one off the boat. And if his people are not in the land of Israel, where they're supposed to be, they're stuck in galus, exile, that's where he remains. So Moses knew that his generation, we know that his generation didn't go into the land of Israel, right, with the 12 spies. So Moses found a way to make sure that he stayed behind. Chabad actually has a song called Allah Sela Hachach, Allah Sela Hachach, Allah Sela Hachach, Allah Sela Hachach, Vayitu Mayim. Allah Sela Hachach means Al Hasela, on the rock, Hachach, you hit. Vayitu Mayim, and then water came out. Why is it the melody is seemingly inappropriate? It's a joyous melody, but the story seems to be very sad and tragic. Because we know that Moses did it on purpose. That Moses, he was a true leader, and he's staying behind with his people, and the new leader will be Yeshua. Yeshua will be the one that will take everybody in. He's the one that will bring the Jewish people into the land of Israel. And there will be a connection with Yeshua and this week's Parsha, which I'll say at the end. The name of the book, it was called the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim. Okay, Ve'eschanan, Moses is praying right before he's about to pass away, right? We're just a few Parshias away from him passing away. We're like, 20 days away, in the time at that time. And he's praying to go in the land of Israel, which seems to be a contradiction with what I said. So Moses, it's not very clear whether Moses actually wanted to live there, as opposed to just go in and come back out. What's the why did Moses want to go in there? What was he trying to accomplish? And what's the question? What do you mean? Moses wanted to go in the land of Israel. Why did Moses want to go in the land of Israel? And why is he asking right now? Let me just go in for just perhaps a quick little minute. What's the question? The deeper question. And according to Chassidus, Moses is about to die. And what happens when a person passes away is they go to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Bliss. Eden means bliss, the Garden of the Bliss. And it says in the Mishnah that 1 hour in Gan Eden is greater than all the pleasure in this world. All the pleasure you can possibly have in this world pales in comparison to 1 hour in Gan Eden. The next Mishnah says the best thing a person can do is teshuvah and maisim tovim, like we spoke about last week. Teshuvah, constantly trying to get closer to God while in this world. Only in this physical world can you approach God, with effort. Only here can you reach God's essence. And maisim tovim, which are mitzvahs. Only in this world. And it says there's nothing greater than teshuvah and maisim tovim, greater than all of the bliss in Gan Eden. Seemingly a contradiction. First one said 1 hour of Gan Eden is better than any pleasure in this world. And in the next Mishnah it says teshuvah maisim tovim is greater than all the possible pleasure you can have in Gan Eden. And teshuvah maisim tovim is only something you can do in this world. Which is better? Teshuvah maisim tovim or Gan Eden? Well, you have to understand, what is Gan Eden? Why is it so pleasurable? Gan Eden is what's called, you have ne'enin miziv hashchina. You take pleasure in the ray of the Shechina. The Shechina, as you'll probably hear, you heard that word probably many times. The Shechina refers to God's revelation of godliness, the lowest level of God's revelation. Each world, there are 4 worlds, each world has its own Shechina. And it's the world of, it's revelation that you can comprehend. So you can imagine, you go to the Shechina of the highest world, the world of Atzilus, and you can comprehend that what you're actually experiencing. You can comprehend it. The only downside of that, and what compares in comparison to what pales in comparison to what we have in this world, is in this world we can reach God's essence. You can't comprehend essence. You can only experience essence, embrace essence. Your mind is limited. Essence is unlimited. So therefore, the only way you can do it is by just experiencing it, connecting, becoming one and consumed within it. And what in this world, how can you get God's essence in this world? Through mitzvahs, mitzvot. Mitzvah comes from the word tzavtza, which means connection. God put his essence into the mitzvah. So by doing a mitzvah, you're actually grasping God's essence. What's the problem? It's not revealed to us. We can't appreciate that like we can appreciate in Gan Eden. That you can comprehend. It's an appreciation of it. In this world, we don't appreciate it yet. Not until Mashiach comes will we see the fruits of our labor, what exactly we're producing. And however, it does leave an impact on the soul. And that imprint, or that impact, really an imprint that it has on the soul, you carry with you when you go to Gan Eden. You actually see a little bit of that. You get a little bit of it. However, here it's only a little bit when you go to Gan Eden. That's the ziv, so to speak. It's like that little ray, a little tiny parcel. You don't really get everything. Here, you're getting everything. And then when you leave, you're getting a little bit. But when the neshamas come back down into the bodies, when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to appreciate it in its fullest glory. Don't get too caught into it. I can't tell you what it's like because it hasn't happened yet. But that's what it says. So that's what Moses was trying to accomplish. He was trying to just experience. He wanted the ability to do more mitzvahs. That's really what he wanted, so that he could grasp God's essence more and more. How many mitzvahs have they had already in the desert? Most mitzvahs are connected with the Beis HaMikdash and the Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. Here and outside of Eretz Yisrael, we don't have that many mitzvahs. I mean, we got a lot, but we don't have that many. So that's what Moses wanted. That was what Moses really was yearning for, to go into Israel. He wasn't just going for the falafel. All right, moving on. Let's go on. One of the mitzvahs touched about in this week's Parsha is to Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Serve God with joy. We spoke about that a lot. How do you serve God with joy? Remember, I say it all the time. I know, because I sit it at my Shabbos table, and people kind of rolled their eyes. They're like, "Yeah, you've told us this, every week." Achshava, thoughts, is the same words as simcha. So what you fill your mind with, that's how you have good. That's how you bring joy. Whatever you fill your mind with joyful things, really, namely godly concepts, you'll be a godly person. Yismach, which means to be joyful, is the same letters as Mashiach. So really, when Mashiach comes, is the time that we're only going to have true joy. But let me illustrate by a story. I want to do an interesting story. If a person can live with his sense of mission and what he's supposed to do at all times, you feel a sense of mission at all times, that will bring you joy. Yeah, you have meaning at every moment in your life. That will bring a person to joy. There's a story of Reb Zusha of Anapoli and his brother Reb Eli Melech from Lezhensk. They're very famous Chassidim, students of the Maggid of Mezrich, contemporaries of the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, the one who wrote the Tanya. And one of the things they liked to do was go from town to town and perform the great mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, redeeming captives. Back in the day, people lived off the land. There was a landowner, a poritz, and they live off his land. They pay him rent for the land to grow their crops and try to sell their crops, or they would own. They would own. Basically like how McDonald's works today. You pay McDonald's. They own the building, right? And you pay them rent. So the same thing then. Like he would have land, and you could pay him to use out his hotels. You can build a hotel on his land. You just have to pay him some rent or tax. So sometimes, it was a bad season. People didn't come, whatnot. So what would happen is they would fall behind in their bills and their payments. And there was no law then. There was no police to take you to jail and court system. I mean, back then you could do whatever you want. It was kind of lawlessness back in the 1700s in Russia. And they would collect money to pay off the debt so that he would take the people, make them free. What would happen? A lot of times, if they couldn't pay their rent, they would throw the Jew in jail, in like a prison in his basement or whatever on the land, until somebody came and paid the debt, or he found out a way to pay the debt, then they would be free. Typical. So anyway, it's called Pidyon Shvuyim, redeeming captive. Unlike ransom. Ransom has its own laws, and we won't get into them now, but they're very complicated and they're very serious. We don't pay terrorists, if you want to know. So they were trying to collect money. They were going from town to town to collect money. And there were other people that were collecting money from the town, and they were mad that, hey, we got competitive business over here. Who are these yuckles, these two guys coming over here to collect money from our donors? And so they went to the Russian authorities. These other poor people went to the Russian authorities and said, oh, these people are stealing money. And they threw them in jail. The Russian authorities threw Rabbi Eli Melech and Reb Zusha into jail. And so they get to jail, and it comes time to daven mincha. They daven mincha. No, I'm sorry. Comes time to daven mincha, and Reb Zusha is crying. And his brother turns to him and says, "Why are you crying?" He said, "I'm crying because there's a toilet inside of the jail cell." And he says, "So what's the big deal?" He said, "Well, we can't pray. There's a law that you can't pray in front of feces. I mean, this wasn't a toilet where you flushed. It was just a bucket on the ground." And we learned in our halacha class 2 weeks ago about the distance you need to keep from feces and urine. So he was sad because I can't daven mincha, I can't pray the afternoon service while this bucket is here. And so for a while they were moaning and they were crying and saying, "Oh, what can we do? We can't connect to God. We can't pray. This will be the first time in our life not praying mincha." Then his brother said, Elimelech said, "Wait a minute. The same God who said you have to daven the afternoon prayer says you don't pray the afternoon prayer if you're in front of feces and you can't get rid of it. So we're serving God just like we were serving God by being able to pray. Here, we're serving God by not praying." And with that, it wasn't about prayer. It was about connection to God. It was about servicing God, servicing every opportunity, finding every opportunity to connect with God. Like we speak about tying our shoelaces. It's an opportunity to connect with God. If you do it, there's a certain way, and that's the way you put on your shirt. These are a way to connect to God. And with that, they were dancing, and the peasants in the prison had no idea why they were so happy, and they were happy, and everyone was dancing and dancing. And the prison guard came over and said, "What's going on over here?" And he asks one of the peasants, and the peasants say, "They're excited about the bucket of feces." To which the prison guard said, "If that's the case, I'm taking it away." And they took it away, and then they were able to daven mincha. It's a good story to live with. The point over here is that there's always an opportunity to serve God. You have a mission to serve God, and you always have an opportunity, and that should bring you joy at every moment. There's no excuses. There's no time when you shouldn't be serving. Even in the times of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av was seemingly a sad day, yet, like just yesterday, we fasted 25 hours. However, there's a joy knowing that there's at the same time there's a sadness, there's a joy. You have a mitzvah to be joyful, and there's a joyful there's still this undercurrent, this inner joy that still continues even during Tisha B'Av, which is a sad day, knowing that this is the way to serve God. This is what God wants from me. He doesn't want me to eat. He doesn't want me to brush my teeth. He doesn't want me to, you feel disgusting, oily, I couldn't wash my face, all these different things. Yet nevertheless, there's still a joy in even in times like that, in times of sadness. Moving on. Okay. Now today's we know that the Parshas are divided into 7 parts. Today is Monday, so it's Sheni, the second Aliyah, which starts with verse 5. And that's what I'm going to look at right now. Moses says, "I want you to pay attention to something. Pay attention to the way I taught you Torah, and I want you to emulate that way." The Talmud says, what does that mean? Moses was saying, "I want you to emulate the same way I taught you Torah. I want you to teach Torah. Just like I taught it for free, I want you to teach it for free." So says the Talmud, that's, wait a minute. Hold on over here. Moses was rich, very rich. How do we know? The story is, when God told him to rewrite the Torah, God gave him the 2 tablets on Mount Sinai. He came down, saw that we were worshiping the golden calf, which was on Tisha B'Av. He saw it, and then he threw the tablets on the ground and broke. God said, "Okay, you forgave us, all good." Seder. God said, he forgave us on Yom Kippur. But write for yourself a second tablets. You write for yourself. And where are you going to find these tablets? Some say it was sapphire. Look inside your tent, Moses. Dig them up, and I'll carve it out for you. And God said, "Well, you'll carve it out." And God said, "The shavings that you have from the stone, you can collect and sell." With that, Moses became extremely wealthy. Imagine that someone comes with sapphire, the finest sapphire you've ever seen in your life. And not only that, what it was used for, the sentimental value was incredible. With that, Moses became very wealthy. So the Gemara says it's not really fair. Moses, you were rich, so of course you were able to teach whenever you want. So obviously that's not what Moses meant. Moses didn't mean for sure you have to teach it for free. The halacha, what the Talmud says is like this. One second, my kid is okay. 1 second, everybody. Okay, sorry. Have to make sure my kid's okay. Moses said what? Oh, the Talmud says that a person has to, if a person, you're not paying someone to teach you Torah. You're paying someone that for what they could have been doing. In other words, if the person is somewhat capable and he could have had a job in Wall Street or whatever it was, and he could have made a lot more money, you pay for that time that he could have used in another way. In other words, he provided you or she provided you with an opportunity to learn Torah, so they gave up their other possible occupation to teach you Torah. You pay them for their loss that they could have made a lot more. They could have made more money. You don't go and teaching Torah to become rich. I can tell you that much. But you're paying them for what they could have actually done at a different time, or that time that they could have spent making other money in a different means. One thing you're not allowed to do is have like a sliding scale. You can't say, okay, for Rashi, I'll teach you Talmud for $100. I'll teach you Rashi for $10, and I'll teach you Tosfos, Tosfos on the Rashi for $5. You can't do that. It's got to be like you pay per hour, so to speak, or per lesson, or per whatever, one flat rate. There's like serious laws into teaching Torah. Any questions so far? Somebody give me a wave. Anybody there? You guys are very quiet. The problem with teaching on Zoom in a classroom, when I teach in a classroom, or I teach at shul, teach in the synagogue, I can see people's faces. At least I see them closing their eyes or whatnot. You guys, I'm just joking. Moving on. So, thanks, Aristia. Okay, moving on. A lot of famous lines in this parsha. One is, you should make it known to your children the day you stood before Mount Chorev. In other words, what's Mount Chorev? Mount Chorev refers to Mount Sinai. What does it mean? Why is Moses giving us a warning, saying that you must, or a mitzvah, or that he makes this promise that we should not forget the day we stood before Mount Sinai and received the Torah? Seemingly, that's not a very difficult task to forget. Haraya, what's the proof that we've never forgotten? And it's not because of this. It was such an unbelievable event that our grandparents told their children and our children, nobody ever forgot, for the most part, to tell their children, by the way, one time there was this unbelievable event that happened to us as a people, 3 million of us, God revealed himself. I can't even begin to explain to you what it was like. But, so what is Moses telling us? Don't forget the day you stood before Mount Sinai. It means don't forget the feelings that you had. The awe and trepidation and fear in a sense of respect, but really the awe that you felt, those emotions you felt when you stood by Mount Sinai when God gave us the Torah. Now, how do you do that? So it says, when a person learns Torah, lishma. Lishma means for the right reasons, for the right sake. You're learning it for the sake of connecting to God. Not learning it for any self-aggrandizement, make yourself better, or even just to have some sort of knowledge. But if you're really using it to connect to God, which is the ultimate reason that's what Torah and everything's all about, is trying to connect to God. It's called Shechina Mideberes B'Tech, that Hashem speaks for you. Hashem, if you're learning Torah the proper way, God, so to speak, is saying the words of the Torah for you. You're connected with God at that moment, and that should bring upon you, that'll automatically, if you meditate upon that idea, and make it part of you, that will automatically make you have tremendous respect when you learn Torah. And that's why there are many people who stand while they learn Torah. A lot of tzaddikim, really, they stand when they learn Torah. It's best to learn Torah not leaning back in a chair, or I remember one time I was in yeshiva and I was just leaning back. About one time, I did it very often actually. I would get a little smack from my teacher saying, "What are you doing? Like, sit up, be a little bit more respectful." Not that I had disrespect for the Torah, I was just tired. But you'll see that a lot of times people won't have their elbows on the table, or they'll be sitting like this, studying and with a respect and trepidation, and a respect for the Torah, a respect, because they know that God, so to speak, is speaking through them. Not so to speak, God is speaking through them, if you do it the right way. So that's this week's Parsha.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would this be an appropriate space to bring up a teaching from the Arizal and the Zohar?
Well, as long as it's on topic.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I was learning this on a lecture I was watching, and I'm going to paraphrase really terribly, but Tish B'Av is connected with the event of the wrestling of Jacob and the angel. And, that has to do with the sciatic nerve, and the sciatic nerve is connected with forgetting. And I just saw a connection because I read Lamentations yesterday, and the way it's described in this week's Parsha, the exile, and, what happens if you forget? What happens if you forget what happened in Egypt and you go off the derrick? This is what happens. And the way Moses describes it in this Parsha is like, the wording, the verbiage is very, very similar to Lamentations, the way Lamentations talks about the destruction of the temple and the exile. Okay. So how does this, what's the message here? Like, I see the connection between like the forgetting, like the forgetfulness is a very common theme, like not just in Tish B'Av, but this Parsha, like it's really, really timely. Like the Parsha comes after Tish B'Av for a very, very good reason. But what is it? Like, what's the deeper meaning there?
Well, actually, this is the Parsha we read on Tisha B'Av in the morning service. I don't exactly know all of that. I know the mitzvah of forgetting Torah is only if you forget on purpose. You're purposely trying to forget the Torah. If you by accident forget the Torah, it's not a big deal. But the warning of don't forget the Torah, don't forget any of these things, meaning don't actively try to forget the event. But anything more than that, I don't exactly know the direct connection of this week's Parsha to the wrestling of Jacob, and I have to look it up. That's all.
May I offer one more possible connection? Sure. First chapter of Isaiah talks about kind of like the precursor to the destruction, where he's berating the Jewish people for, they're keeping mitzvot, right? But it's not, like you said, lishma, which is the core of the issue. Is that on the same thread? Is that on the same subtext?
Okay. That's a very good question. Okay, that is actually a very good. What's exactly the problem over here if you're not learning the Shema? The problem is people learn Torah, just exactly what I was saying. People learn Torah for certain reasons. But there's something, what people forget, and what they forgot during the first temple was the Nosen HaTorah, the one who gave the Torah. The whole point of learning Torah is to connect to the Nosen HaTorah, the one who gave the Torah. They were just learning Torah for the sake of, they were just learning Torah without making a bracha beforehand. What does that mean? They weren't making brachas, blessings, before they learned the Torah. Meaning they weren't, when they sat down to learn the Torah, they were learning it like any other subject. They were learning it by root. They were learning it like any other subject. I'm going to approach this like I approach science and math and any other, something I want to study. But what you're supposed to be doing is how do you have respect for the Torah? By knowing who gave the Torah. Who gave this to you? Who are you connecting to over here? What exactly is going on while you learn the Torah? That'll automatically bring fear and keep you in line, so to speak. It'll keep you growing and keep you doing what you're supposed to be doing by focusing on the Nosen of Torah, the one who gave the Torah. That's actually the contribution of Chassidus. That's the main contribution of Chassidus. That we stopped with just learning Torah just to learn Torah, but it became about connecting to the Nosen of Torah. This is the way you connect to the essence, the creator of the world, which is the whole point. This is exactly what God wants. He doesn't want you just to learn Torah. He wants you to connect with him. He wants to be revealed in this world. And they were forgetting that. But the issue was we didn't really know who God was. You can't love somebody or appreciate somebody, which will fit in very nicely to the end of the Parsha, unless you know something about them. You have to learn about them and connect and meditate upon who they are and appreciate who they are, and that'll grow to have a love and a connection. Does that kind of answer? I don't know if that maybe
Yeah,
that's one question, but
that's absolutely, yeah, that's excellent. Because really what I was trying to get at is like, what does that mean for us today? Because, as we all know, like this is a very auspicious time. And like even even on Tishba of the saddest day, I definitely felt an underlying feeling of joy that was certainly hard to contain. Because you can't help but see the light that's like penetrating the vessel. And this is really the wisdom of Rabbi Akiva. You start to be like, oh, that's why he was laughing.
right,
But it's hard to contain that joy, and you have to remind yourself like, oh, let's like tone it down,
right,
in mourning.
right.
But yes, answered my question perfectly. But it's an open question.
Yeah, no, it's a question that we live with, by the way. It's not just a question for the day. It's a question. It's a question every day a person has to ask himself. Like, what am I doing here? Why am I learning Torah? Not just learning Torah, why any of this? What is this all about? It's to connect to the one who created the Torah. To connect to the one who created the world. Why is there a world here? Just to walk around in the world? No, to connect to the one who created the world. And it'll fit when we get to the Shema in this week's Parsha. All these different relationships. Why do I have these? Why do all these people in my life? What's the point of them? Why should a person try to get married? Why should a person have children? Why should a person have a parent? Why should a person have an aunt? All these different things. It's going to talk. We'll touch upon in this week's Parsha just briefly. Well, let's just keep going. There's a very famous line. Ata hares ladas. You should know today, says Moses. Ki avayahu alikim ein oid. There's nothing else besides God. So you might think that means there's no other God. There's only one God, no other God. No, but that's not what it says. There's nothing else besides God. Ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing else besides Him. As we spoke about many times in Chassidus, there is nothing. This world is nothing more than an extension of God Himself. The question is, we know God exists. The question is, do we exist? That's a question in Chassidus. It's a classic question in Kabbalah. Are we really here? We are here. We are here because it says Bereshis bara Elokim, that God created the world. But at the other side it says there's nothing else besides Him, though. What does that mean? Is there a world or is there not a world? So that's what Chassidus spends hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages trying to explain. And I just saw very recently from the Rebbe about Tisha B'Av, what we spoke about, that at the same time you have to be sad, and at the same time, at one hand we're sad, and you have to be, because it says a person who doesn't rebuild the base every day, the base mikdash is not built in his lifetime. If the base mikdash is not built, that means you're destroying the base mikdash. In other words, whatever is destroying the base mikdash still continues, and so therefore a person should feel upset and sad because the fact that the base mikdash is not rebuilt shows that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And therefore, we're not really any different than the Jews of the time. But at the same time, we have a pasuk that says, "Even with Hashem b'simcha," you have to serve God with joy. So it's seemingly like these two going along these same themes, the same theme that we're talking about. Seemingly, there's two of their opposites; they are opposed to one another. Says the Rebbe, doesn't matter. Nimna v'nimnois. A person lives with contradictions. It's true; they're both true. And a person lives with contradictions, and it's not a contradiction, not a problem to live with contradictions. Why? Because we emulate God. And God is above the world, above creation. The whole idea of time and space and good and bad and whatever you can think of, that's all part of creation. These are created things. That's not, God is above time. God is above space. We don't comprehend that's very difficult to understand. We don't know what that even means. But God knows what it means because God is above it. And the fact that we have a piece of God within inside of us that we can emulate God, we have no problem with these seemingly contradictory statements and these contradictory ideas found all over Torah, because we understand that why are we cool with that? Because there's a piece of God inside of us that makes it, for whatever reason, we sense that it's okay. I'm cool with that. I understand there are contradictions in my life, contradictions all around me. And I get it. I totally get it. So nevertheless, we strive to understand we strive to comprehend it. Torah is meant to be comprehended, so therefore there must be some sort of, we can take away some message. The clear message is that we can live with contradictions. So that's in this. That comes from Aleinu, who was set up by Yeshua. The Aleinu is a very important prayer. It's the last prayer in the prayer. It's the last prayer in Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, all the prayer services. That was given by Yeshua. He's the one that composed the Aleinu L'Shabeach. Excuse me. And it's very important to say, and it's very fundamental. And it basically sums up our mission in life. Shema Yisrael. The Shema is in this week's Parsha. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Not the next part, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. That is not in this week's Parsha. I'll talk about where that comes from. But the V'yahavta and the V'haya Im Shemaya, the next paragraphs are from this week's Parsha. Just some brief halachas about Shema. It says, Uvashach b'cha uvkamecha. You should say the Shema while you're lying down and when you wake up, which the whole story in the Gemara, there's a whole back and forth in the Gemara brachas. What does that exactly mean? But the halacha is you have to say it when you wake up, meaning in the morning time and in the evening time. Now, when does the morning start and end? And then when does the evening begin? Yeah, you have to say it by a certain period of time. If it says you say it in the morning, well, when is morning? When does morning begin and when does morning end? And you have to say it at night. When does night begin and when does night end? And that's a huge, knowing what time it is and the times of the day is extremely important in Judaism. This is a mitzvah from the Torah to recite the words Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So it starts about 40 minutes. The morning starts 40 minutes after dawn. That's just to give you, without getting all into it, about 40 minutes after dawn, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, you should be good after dawn, until the third hour of the day. So here in Michigan, that's about 9:45 this time of the year, 9:45 in the morning. If you say it after 9:45 in the morning, you do not fulfill the mitzvah of saying Shema. You missed out on the mitzvah of saying Shema. That is the best mitzvah to start with, by the way. If anyone needs to start with a mitzvah, the Shema. It's the first mitzvah that a person will encounter. And it's the easiest one. You just say that one line.
What about non-Jews? Because the Shema has very specific verses mentioning tefillin, mentioning mezuzot, mentioning different things that are visibly Jewish.
Yes.
What's the deal with non-Jews saying it?
Yeah. First of all, you can say it. It just doesn't have the mitzvah. The commandment is not upon you. So therefore, there's nothing to fulfill. However, if you're looking to convert, you want to eventually, part of the conversion process is to start doing mitzvahs. Now, there's certain mitzvahs, even though they're not obligatory, but you have to start doing them in order to see what you're getting yourself into. Yeah, you can't just walk in one day and it's not just like you got to you want to become an American citizen, you got to study for the exam, so to speak. But here it's not enough just to study. You actually have to start doing it. So one of the mitzvahs, if that's a goal in life, then you have to start doing it. However, that is not a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah incumbent upon you. You don't miss or gain anything by doing it. However, you should still pray to God. You still have it, and we're going to talk about it actually in a little bit. You still have a mitzvah to connect to God and to know God, and set times every day to think about God, contemplate God, meditate upon God, verbalize that because that'll have an effect upon you. So now saying the actual verse Shema Yisrael, that doesn't fall upon you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't say, there's nothing else besides God, or that line.
But is it prohibited to say Shema?
No, I don't think so. No, it wouldn't be prohibited to say Shema.
Yeah, because and I'm gonna jump ahead. You're gonna get to this, I know, but it says, interestingly enough, that when it's reviewing the Ten Commandments, that the commandment to observe Shabbat is directed to not only the Israelites but the strangers among them. And if everyone was Jewish or like an Israelite, there wouldn't be a distinction between the Israelites and the strangers. So I'm assuming the strangers are not Jewish. So why are they getting the commandment to observe Shabbat, but the Talmud, the Gemara?
The ger toisha b'sharecha. A ger means someone who is. There's certain statuses. It's not talking about a non-resident alien who's not at all. In other words, a complete non-Jew living in the land of Israel does not have the obligation to study. To keep Shabbos. That is specifically talking about a non-Jew who converted, or as a slave and became free. They have an obligation to keep Shabbos. In other words, it's a non-Jew who just lives in the land of Israel and as a regular citizen does not keep Shabbos. He's not allowed to keep Shabbos. You can keep as many mitzvahs of Shabbos. He has to make sure you break Shabbos every Shabbos. Yeah. In fact, that's very a person who's converting. They have to start keeping Shabbos, but they have to break one Shabbos a month. One Shabbos. Every Shabbos they have to make sure they don't keep Shabbos perfectly. It's a very common thing. Okay. Where did the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Vod the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Vod come from? Moses overheard two angels talking to each other, and they said Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Vod. And Moses said, "Whoa, there's a." I'm not going to get into the chassidus behind it, but he incorporated that in part of the Shema. But because it didn't come from God and it didn't come from the Jewish people, we say it very quietly. Yeah, that's why we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta. Why do we say it quietly? Because it's not really. We weren't really supposed to. In other words, we're not really. Moses overheard it. We weren't really supposed to say. However, on Yom Kippur, we say it out loud because on Yom Kippur, we're like angels. That's why we don't eat. We're very holy. We're holy like angels, and therefore we can say it out loud. We're holding on the same level as angels, so to speak. It says, B'chol lavavcha, you have to love God. B'chol lavavcha, b'chol nafshecha, you should love God with all your heart. But it's lavavcha should really be spelled lamed veis or lamed vet chaf. It says it has two vases in it, two vets in it. Yeah. Lamed vet chaf. Why is there two? Seemingly it's a mistake. It's not a mistake. Because the two vases refer to the two souls that you have within you, the nefesh elokis and the nefesh bahamias, the godly soul and the animal soul. And our job in this world is to convince the animal soul there's nothing wrong with the animal soul. It just lives for its own. It just lives for itself. It's egotistical. It just lives to feel good and will do whatever is good for the body, do whatever is good for itself, and to teach it about godliness. And that both of them, both the godly soul and the animal soul, should both be fired up about godliness. That is the commandment. That is the mitzvah. That is something we work on every single day. And how do we go to love God? Like we said before, learning about the Nosin of Torah, the one who gives the Torah, learning about God himself through learning Kabbalah and Chassidus. It's the only way you can do it. All right, that's pretty much the Parsha. I think it's about an hour. Yeah, that's pretty good. Stop there. Anybody have any questions? So this week's Parsha is pretty packed with some fundamental Torah things that we say every single day. All right. I wish you guys a good day, good rest of the day. And I'll speak to you later. See you tonight. You all.